What's going on, guys? It's Justin, the smart home technician, and as promised, I'm back to show you some tips and tricks on how to install your smart home security system and equipment. In the last video, I basically showed you how to set up your system, how to get it rolling out of the box. In this video, I'd like to show you some wire concealment, wall fishing, and how to use some of the existing wiring that's in place so you guys can install pieces of equipment like your wireless keypad, your wireless cameras, and your wireless doorbell camera. These pieces of equipment are wireless, as in the essence they communicate wirelessly, but they still need to plug into a permanent power source to work properly. And I'm going to show you guys how to do that in the least invasive, the easiest way possible for about $20 to $30 worth of tools that you can order online. I can show you how to save yourself hundreds of dollars on having to hire a professional like me. Alright guys, one of the first things I want to show you how to do is use the existing wiring. I already had a system in place. There's wiring when I moved into this home that was going from this location, and it goes to a closet in my daughter's bedroom. At first I didn't know where that was, so what I had to do is I had to figure out where the power for the old panel that I replaced with this one was coming from, as I'll show you how to replace this one as well. What I did was I just looked around. I couldn't find it. There was a bunch of stuff in the closet, so I couldn't see the location that it was mounted. So rather than sit there and drive myself crazy, what I did was I went up into the attic, and I climbed up into the attic. I came over to this door. I found the wire where it came up into the attic, and I traced it all the way over to the closet in my daughter's bedroom. I moved some stuff around. Like I said, we had just moved into the home. So I moved some things around in my daughter's closet, and then I was able to find the security panel. I'm going to show you guys, I'll disconnect this right now, and I'm going to show you how to cut the wire and splice it so you can make this compatible with your new system. You don't ever want to use your old transformer for your new system. If you check the voltage and you check the ampage and you check all that and it matches to a T, you can use it, but I always recommend just using the one that comes with the system. Why use an old transformer with a new system when you can just replace it and use the one that was designed for the system that you're installing? Alright guys, before I do any work on the actual panel, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to unplug the transformer. Again, I know this is the transformer because I came in here and I hooked all this stuff up earlier, but if you don't know which wires are which, worst case scenario, you can climb up in the attic and you can trace it back, or if you have a line toner, you can put a line toner on it. The only problem with that is if it's still plugged into power, it won't send a signal. So you really do just need to trace the wire and figure out which one is the right wire before you work on it. Again, I'm going to unplug it. There's no more power going to my keypad at the front, and now I'm okay to work on that keypad without blowing this transformer. Even though I'm not going to use that system anymore, I still don't want to just blow a perfectly good transformer. So I'll save this, I'll put it away with my closest panel, maybe sell it online, who knows. But I'm a Pulsar guy from this day forward. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're going to take our cord that comes with the Pulsar alarm system, that is compatible with the Pulsar alarm system, and we're going to take it, the transformer, and we're going to cut it with a little bit of a tail on it, just so we've got some stuff to work with. Always make sure that it's unplugged before you cut it, of course. You will short it out, certainly. Alright, and then I'm going to take the pigtail here. And what you want to do is you just want to remember when you're looking at these things, there's going to be a stripe on one, and one will not have a stripe. The one with the stripe on it is always going to be your positive. So you want to get some wire nuts. You can use orange wire nuts to do this with, or electrical tape will work, but I do not recommend it. I would get some wire nuts, or what I like to use, these things are called beanies. You can order them online, dolphins, beanies, whatever you want to call them. They work great. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to hook this up here. I'm going to use my red and my yellow for my positive. I'm going to use my green and my black for my negative. I'm doubling them up because the wire that's in my home is a 22 gauge wire, which is fine, but I usually prefer an 18. It comes with 18. I prefer an 18 gauge wire for power. So I'm doubling up my 22 gauge wire with the 18 gauge that it comes with. I've got my red and yellow on my positive leg, I've got my green and black on my negative leg. I'm just going to beanie those up, and then I'll crimp them right down. And then I personally like to tape these up for a little added protection. I don't have any tape on me, so I'm going to stop the video and do that real quick. We'll be right back. Alright guys, as you can see, I covered up my fish tank. I don't want to get any stuff in there. I just did the best that I could to cover the old keypad marking with the new keypad. I made sure it was level. I mounted it with 4 screws. I'm going to go into the closet and I'm going to hook up the transformer before I plug this up, but just wanted to show you what I had done so far. We're going to go get that transformer plugged in, and then we'll power this bad boy up. Again, we're going to use our stripe. That is the positive leg of your DC power. On every transformer I've ever seen in the last 20 years that uses DC power, the stripe on your cable, and I'll show you a close up here, is going to be your positive leg. It's a very faint stripe, but if you look hard enough you can see it. Okay, just about every power cord with DC power that I've ever used is going to have that on there to indicate which leg is your positive and which leg is your negative. I'm using orange and yellow as my positive, green and black as my negative. That's what I chose over there, so I have to match it up over here. You can use anything you like, but standard in the industry is going to be your lighter colors are going to be your positive, and your darker colors, your neutral colors, are going to be your negative or your common. All right. So strip those back. We're going to tie these together, and then we'll power it up. I'm going to make sure I got my positive leg. I do. Positive. To my orange and yellow. Again, I'm using beanies to secure these together. You can use little yellow wire nuts if you like. Really anything you want. My tape just fell. Just want to make sure that it's going to insulate it properly. So, especially in like an old legacy panel like this one, you don't have your wires bumping up against any old connectors or anything that might still be charged in here, which it shouldn't. If you unplug the old system properly, you really shouldn't have any charged pieces in here, but who knows what could have possibly been installed before and what's plugged in down the line. So, alright, there we go. Everything's hooked up. I dropped my tape. Always like to give it an extra layer of protection and insulation. I always like to, when you have your wires, your power wires like this, I pull one leg back this way, one leg back that way. That really separates your positive and your negative and keeps them from coming together and arcing underneath this other added layer of insulation here. Just something that I've always done after years and years of doing this and seeing stuff happen. Alright, I've got that insulated. We're going to go ahead and power it up. No, I'm just kidding. Now we're going to go power up our keypad. Alright guys, now that we've got our panel mounted on the wall, I want to show you guys what you would do if there was no wire in place. What we would want to do is find an outlet close to the area that you want to mount your panel. And there's one right behind my fish tank. I'm not going to mess with the fish. They're already irritated from me moving their tank and covering them up earlier. So we're just going to work on another outlet over here that I'll show you guys the same exact technique that I would use if I was doing this here. But what you would want to do is you would want to keep your panel in the same beam cavity as your outlet. So I'll show you how to figure that out. Okay, my outlet is right here, my panel's over here. If I wanted to have no exposed wire at all and do it in a fairly easy way, I'm going to have to keep my panel in the same beam cavity as my... Alright, now it's time to show you guys how with about $30 worth of supplies, you can save yourselves hundreds of dollars from having to hire a professional like me to come in here and hide your wire for you. The first thing that you're going to need is this thing right here. It's called a wet noodle. Sounds a little funny, but I learned about this thing about 10 years ago, and what it is it's a magnet, has a thick end and a skinny end. It also comes with about a 15-foot metal chain that you can drop down the wall and pull right out with a magnet. Or if it's an insulated wall, this will work really well on a non-insulated wall. But if the wall is insulated, you're going to need one of these rods. You can get one for about $10 at Home Depot, or you can get a whole pack of these, about 40 foot worth, for $10 at Harbor Freight. But I like to cut about 1.5 feet of that chain off and tape it to the rod. So in an insulated wall, you can shove this up through the insulation, cut your hole for your panel, and then pull it out. I always recommend, before you cut a hole for your panel to be mounted, what we want to do is you're going to want to take off the outlet cover, and I'm going to show you how you would fish this wall. So the first thing that you want to do, guys, is you want to make sure that your panel, the hole that you cut for your panel, is going to be in the same beam cavity as your power. The power outlet is usually going to be on one of two sides of a beam. So what I like to do is I like to pop off the power outlet, and then very carefully, if you're using a metal screwdriver like this, you don't want to touch any of the terminals in there. I'm going to poke on that side. Okay, that's empty. So there's no beam on that side of the power outlet. That means that the beam is going to be over here. And if you pay attention, I'm poking a hole in the area that this plate covered up. So once I'm done and I put the plate back on there, you won't be able to see any of the wiring or any holes. Okay, so I poked my screwdriver through there, and it's stuck. So that's where the beam is. The beam runs straight up right here. If I wanted to mount a panel on this wall, I would want to make the hole for my alarm panel in the same beam cavity. That means right here and about 16 inches over. I want to keep it in that area as to be able to easily fish it without having to do anything crazy. Like I said, I'm trying to show you guys how to do a basic wire fish. There's ways around going through beams, but it's not something that you really want to do yourself. So like I said, our empty beam cavity is on this side of the outlet. So then what I would do is I would make a tiny hole just big enough for my noodle to go through. Again, being very careful not to touch any of the terminals on the power outlet. If you can see, I'm actually working on the outside of the box, so I'm not in any real danger of touching that. All right. Then what I like to do is, before I go drilling any hole up here to mount my panel, I'll take this rod and I'll stick it up there and just make sure that there's no horizontal beams, any purlines that are going to keep me from fishing that wall quickly and easily. Sometimes when they build stick-built homes, especially some older ones, there will be a beam that runs across the top here, and I'll show you guys how to get around that on a later, more advanced video. This is just a basic wall fishing video. So I've already checked to make sure that my beam cavity is empty. There's no purlines or horizontal beams that are going to keep my my fish from dropping down. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this out. And then what I would do, because this is a non-insulated wall, I would just cut my hole. Take your sheetrock knife, use your panel keypad frame to determine where you want your hole to be so it's equal and level to your switches and it looks nice and appropriate to where you'd like to mount it. You're going to cut a small hole just big enough. Really, I like to be able to make it big enough to stick my finger in. If I need to fish the wire out, if I need to get in there and look around, stick a screwdriver in and move insulation around so I can get my noodle in there and grab the metal chain, there's room to do that. So I usually do about maybe a 1 by 2 inch hole. All right, but it's up to you guys. You're going to cut your hole. Then, like I said, on a hollow wall, you'll just drop this chain down. It'll drop right down. And then you would just take your magnet, again, being very careful not to hit the power terminal. No, I'm just kidding. On the outlet here, and you would fish around until it grabs the chain. In a hollow wall, it'll grab that chain pretty easily. You can bend this thing, give it a little bit of an arch. That's what I like to do, because that way when you get it in there, you can really sweep around and it's going to grab that thing. You can pull it forward, backwards, sweep it around. You're going to be able to grab this chain and pull it right through that hole. Then once you do, you'll just take off your wire, pull it up, and make your connection. If this was an insulated wall, it's going to be a little harder, but not too much harder. That's where this little stick comes into play. And then what I like to do, okay, I've got my chain. It's about 1.5 feet. Here's my hole that I'm going to fish. Let's just pretend my panel hole is going to be right about there. So what I like to do is I'll hold my rod up there and figure out exactly where I need that thing to be. So when I have my hole cut and I stick my noodle in there, it's going to grab that chain. That's right about there. So I'll keep my thumb there. You guys can mark it with a marker. You can put a piece of tape on it. Do whatever you want. I like to just hold it with my thumb. And then what I do is I hold the chain with my thumb here. I hold this to keep my mark on the rod, and I slowly guide this thing up. I like to keep my hand on the chain when it's near the outlet like this, just so that chain doesn't accidentally drift off in there and touch over top of one of those terminals, because that'll arc over. 110 volts is not fun to play around with. Be really careful when you're doing this, guys, okay? So that's where I had my mark, so I know right now that with this thing going up the wall like it is, if I had my hole cut right here, I'd be able to take my noodle, I'd stick it right in that wall. Even if this was an insulated wall, you might have to stick a screwdriver in there and dig around so you can get through the insulation and get to the chain. But this noodle here is very effective. You get it in there, you grab that chain, you pull it through, tape off your wire, pull it down, and you're good to go. All right, guys, that's some basic wall fishing right there. I'll make some more content in the future, in the very near future, on how to do some more of the advanced stuff, like how to drill holes up into the attic from the wall, drop chains down from there, and basically run wires everywhere in the house for cameras and all kinds of other devices. All right, guys. Well, that pretty much wraps up our lesson on wall fishing. Whenever you're done with your wire pull, what you want to do is make your splice, tape it thin enough. That's why I like those beanie connectors I was telling you about earlier, because once you clamp them on there, dolphins is what they're actually called. We call them beanies in the industry. Clamp these on there, and you can tape them down thin enough to where you can shove all that right through there. When you shove it back in, you'll take your wall plate and put all your wire in there, shove it all back in, and put your wall plate over top of it, so just enough comes out of the bottom for your transformer to plug in. Of course, don't plug in your transformer until you're done making all the proper splices, and always remember to clean up your mess. One last thing I want to go over before I wrap it up is the location of the wireless devices. There's two things that you're going to want to keep in mind when you're placing your wireless devices, and that's the medians that they have to travel through and the distance that the signal has to travel. Wi-Fi doesn't really like going through material, so you want to have like an open window, especially when you're dealing with brick or metal. Wi-Fi absolutely hates brick or metal and will not go through it. You want to place your devices near or around an open window that signal can go through. It doesn't have to have a straight shot to your hub, as long as your hub is in a location to where the signal can bounce off of a wall, go through an open door, go through an open window. Doesn't really even like drywall. If it's in an enclosed room with a closed door, it's going to diminish your signal significantly. So keep that in mind when placing your devices, where these devices are transmitting their signal and where the signal is being received at, the hub. You want to keep the distance down to about 40 feet, especially with cameras, because they'll start to malfunction and drop out picture once signal deteriorates to a certain extent. And again, keep in mind any material that might be obstructing it, and try to keep a clear path to your hub. All right, guys, until next time, that's all I got. Don't forget the comprehensive guide that I've left on the bottom of the web page that is going to go through everything that I just talked about and a whole lot more. Stay tuned to the Facebook page for a ton of more information, and thanks for tuning in, guys.